Thank you for listening to this PodcastOne production. Now available on Apple Podcasts, PodcastOne, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
The Steve Austin Show is brought to you free today by our friends at BetOnline. Get in the mix at betonline.ag and use the promo code PodcastOne for your 50% welcome bonus. BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts and exclusive partner of PodcastOne Sportsnet.
The following program is a PodcastOne.com production.
From Hollywood, California, by way of the Broken Skull Ranch, this is the Steve Austin Show.
Give me a hell yeah.
Hell yeah. Now, here's Steve Austin.
Well, I'm rolling sound. I got Al Snow on the video scope, as Randy Macho Man Savage would say. God dang, kid, it's good to see you. How are you?
Good to see you, too. It's been ages, man.
It's been a long time. Hey, we're going to call this thing in the ring because I just got finished. Been researching you, watching a lot of your matches. You had a great conversation. You had a great, you had a great conversation with Sean Waltman, X-Pac on 123 360, whatever it's called. Sean, I apologize for botching your show. It's on YouTube. It was over 2 hours. So I watched that, and I saw your interview with Hannibal on Great North Wrestling with Hannibal on YouTube as well. So obviously you guys covered a lot of ground. And so I didn't want to go and just rehash everything, but we got to start somewhere. But here's where we'll start today. I just got off the phone. I was trying to rustle up. I'm in a temporary setting over here, and I had to go get this camp stool that I'm sitting at. I don't know if you can see or what I look like from your vantage point, but I'm in a camp stool. I rustled up as I was coming through the door. Al, you and I have crossed paths, many years. We've been in the same territory, and we're going to get back to a story that happened in 1995, but I am an absolute time fanatic. So when I texted you at 11 a.m., I'm about to sign in, and I called you at 11:02. Brother, I'm never late for a show, so I apologize.
Not at all. Not at all. I understand. It's just newfangled technology. We've got to figure it out as we go along.
Well, in that, I was trying to get this camp stool set up, and then I said, we're doing my family-friendly show. If you let a basic cuss word fly, we're good with that. If you drop an F-bomb, we'll just flip it. But then I started thinking, well, shit, where's my Red Bull? So I started retracing my steps. And, every time you lose something, you go back to the same place about 6 times. It should be right here in the refrigerator. Well, it wasn't, but anyway, I found it. So cheers to you. Let's start with the here and now. Where are you? Okay. What are you doing? God dang, it's been a while since we caught up.
Yeah, I'm back in Louisville, Kentucky, and was working for a long time with TNA as a producer, but we parted ways back in June. And I just recently got into negotiations with a company over in Malaysia, of all places. They're starting up a wrestling company and running in Malaysia and Indonesia and the Philippines, and they want me to be the head trainer and the head producer for them. So I think it's called Asian Wrestling Entertainment. It's a huge market over there that they haven't touched. I think even WWE hasn't quite reached there yet. They've got their TV, but they haven't made any live events or anything, so it's wide open. So I'm glad to get to be a part of that. That'd be awesome.
Hey, man, how did they contact you for that gig? Because, man, you've always been a straight shooter and one of the most knowledgeable guys I've ever talked to in the business when we're talking about stuff in the squared circle, booking, psychology, just all that stuff, and being a great mechanic in the ring as well. So I was looking this up. We're going to round up to 2018. It's right at the end of 2017 as we're doing this. You've been in the business basically 36 years.
Yeah.
So how'd they contact you?
1982.
I know I want to get to that in a little bit, but how'd they contact you and tell me, are you going to be spending a lot of times over there across the pond?
Yeah, not a whole lot. I mean, they want to, whenever they bring me over, they want me to come over for about 10 to 12 days, which I've already been doing. I've started the Al Snow Wrestling Academy, and I've got like 4 of those in the UK, in England, and then I've got 1 in Romania, 1 in Denmark, 1 in Greece, and 1 in Portugal, and then 1 in Chile. So I've already been traveling overseas quite a bit, go over there and go to the schools like around 10 days at a time, as much as I can. Hey, man,
tell me about how you decided, God dang it, I just cut into your answer. I was going to ask you
about go ahead.
Franchising your training schools.
Well, it was, I wrote up a syllabus, a training syllabus that I give to every one of the schools. I go through and my goal is this, Steve, is that, let's say, for instance, a guy starts training in Greece or in England, and, you can only develop so far because you're only as good as the guys you work with. And the key to, especially wrestling, I mean, you know this better than I do, you got to get experience. You got to get as much experience as you can in front of as many different audiences as you can. So if you're in England, you get to a certain point, and you've grown as far as you can go. Well, now you can call the guy in, say, Chile, and now he's running shows down there. He's training basically philosophically the same way. Now the technique, the style might be a little different. The audience is going to be totally different. But now a guy from England can go to Chile, and he can get to work in front of a completely different audience. Philosophically, it's going to be exactly the same way. So it's not like you have to relearn a whole bunch of other, stuff. You just have to learn the new technique or the new style that applies to that audience.
That's what I was going to ask you about the style, just because, man, like if you're bringing up the UK, I mean, god dang, if you go back to the World of Sport days, that tremendous chain wrestling, which all those guys from England seem to have, they bump a little bit differently. A lot of those guys from back in the day were working the 5-minute round system. So with respect to the places you just named, what is the style? Because you know what WWE's doing, or what you guys in TNA were doing, or what the indie level has gravitated towards, and a lot of really violent stuff, along with the super spectacular athleticism. So, what is the style?
Well, I think like what you're talking about with the World of Sport back in the day, it was the technical wrestling was necessitated because of the fact that the censors, they didn't want violence on TV, and that's why. The style was so different, because like when you lost physical contact with the guy and he was on the mat, you couldn't touch him until he got back to his feet. You had to stay in close proximity so that it didn't look like you were doing something, too violent for the TV. And that was why that style developed the way it did. But now I've noticed, like, overall, the style is kind of dictated by WWE. I mean, everybody kind of adopts and follows that style. Psychologically, everybody's making the same mistake, and that is that they've all gotten so far away from the very simple concept of what we actually are selling. Everybody gives you the same, the business has changed. And I couldn't disagree more, because that's bullshit. No, excuse me.
No, you're good.
But because they tell you it's changed, and a lot of times they use it as an excuse or justification for just lazy psychology or lackadaisical work. And they think working is your physical ability or your athletic ability, when that has nothing to do with it. You could be the most unathletic human being on the planet, and we've all seen plenty of those guys in the business, and they can still draw money, because they know how to work an audience and give the audience what they paid to believe, which is that it's a competition, that the outcome actually has gravity to it, that the guys are prize fighters, no different than a boxer or an MMA fighter, and that these guys are out there to really try to win, not just put on a physical performance. And the wrestlers worldwide have gotten so far away from that concept that it makes you wonder, they say, the business has changed. Well, if it's changed and it's all about just the physical performance, why do we still have referees? And why do we still have championship matches? It don't make no sense. And why do the wrestlers themselves get upset? If it's all about your physical performance, why do you care if you lose? I mean, they'll get pissy. You know that. They'll get hot. They get all boo-boo face, walk around all day because they have to lose. It's like, why do you care? If you get a good critical report about your match, that should be all you should care about, because that's what you're out there performing for. You're not trying to make these people believe. And then they'll tell you, Vince, he stooged the business off back in, 86 or 87. He came clean, told her. Well, they've known it's been fake, predetermined since back in the 40s, and they still paid to see it. Like, it's no different than a movie's fake. Spider-Man drew billions of dollars worldwide, but you don't believe that a teenager's actually shooting out of his wrist and sticking to a wall.
I was watching an interview you did a couple of years ago. I guess it was 15. It might have been with respect to the business in general, or maybe specifically WWE. But you said, guys aren't selling anything anymore.
No.
Now, when I watch, as we go into almost 2018, they're still working at a very rapid pace and a much more athletic pace, and the business has evolved, as it should have. But these days, I think it's a touch of oversell. The guy gets kicked in the mouth. He wants to start touching his mouth every 5 seconds. It just drives me crazy. It's one of my pet peeves. It's like, I get it. You just got punted in the mouth, but now you keep doing this. I'm touching my damn mouth. If you can't see me, but I can see Al. And so now it's still that you're knocking a guy down, you're picking him up, you're throwing him in too fast, but now it's the little things that are starting to irritate me, where it was the undersell. No one was selling shit back in the day, where 2 years ago it was just fast. Now it's like, you got to pantomime that the audience is not deaf, dumb, and blind. They get that you hurt, so I'll get off of it. But do you see what I'm saying? I think there's an oversell going on.
To your point, I think, Steve, the reason why there's now an oversell is the guys don't understand what selling is. They don't know what they're selling. They think that when they sell, they're selling their hurt. They don't understand that punt to the face isn't, you're not trying to show the audience it hurt you. You're trying to show them that, oh my God, he punted me in the face, I might lose. Because you're always selling the finish. That's what you're selling. That's what kayfabe is. Everybody gets kayfabe wrong too. They think, kayfabe's dead. It's only dead because you killed it. That's why Matt Hardy got over so well when he did his broken thing in TNA, was because he never broke character. He never gave the audience something other than what he sold them. He sold them a broken Matt Hardy. Every time he was in public, that was what you saw, was a broken Matt Hardy. You didn't see, broken Matt Hardy on TV, and now here's Matt Hardy on podcast with Steve Austin, and he's totally out of character, and he's just Matt, just having a conversation with Steve, and they're two buds kicking it back. He was still broken Matt Hardy. And that's what that audience wants. They want to pay to believe, they want to pick the two most important things, I think you'll agree, is that they want to believe in who you are, and they want to believe in why you did what you did in the ring. And that's what you're selling. You're not selling that you're hurt. You're selling that when I kick you in the teeth, you're selling, oh shit, he might catch me now and might be able to pin me or beat me. That's what you're selling. You're trying to get the audience to buy into that, not into the fact that you're hurt. I tell guys all the time, stand outside the building. Whenever you run any show, WWE, TNA, put it any three letters you want together, and stand anywhere in the world and ask these guys when they come through the door, hey, what was that ring made of? And they'll tell you it's a trampoline or mattress. We all know that ain't the case.
Right. Well, I do believe in selling pain, but yes, to your point, a chink in the armor, he's weakening the system, but just the oversell just chaps my ass.
The Steve Austin Show. The Steve Austin Show.
How do you banish high rates on your car insurance? You switch to Geico during Geico-ween. October is their favorite time of the year, and the folks over at Geico have been working even harder to cast out high rates and craft just the right policy for you and your family. Switching to Geico isn't so scary, especially when they could brew up spellbinding savings just for you. So get a quote today at Geico.com and see just how much you could save. No eye of the newt needed. Happy Geico-ween, everybody. And talking about Matt Hardy, it's funny because, when he broke out that broken character, it's been a few years now, the whole delete thing. I got to give that guy, and I did, a lot of props and a lot of balls, because, those Hardys were a damn good tag team. They can still go. And have had two tremendous runs, both as singles, as tags. One of them will get hurt, or Jeff will get hurt. He'll fall off his motocross bike or something like that. But, Jeff was always the guy that could get over without a green light push. And then you give him a green light push and something would happen and you kind of go cattywampus. But Matt, here's a guy, solid mechanic, not the best looking guy in the world, but god dang, man, he could work his ass off. And he just, the Hardy Boys they've had a magnificent run. And so when all these years later, after having the run that they did as singles and as a tag, for him to create that character and just go, it was so almost incredulous, but because he believed and was so convicted and being that character, people bought in. I loved when he did it.
Yeah, and I tell guys all the time, the most important thing you have to develop in wrestling, I use you as an example, and a couple of other guys, and that is you have to have a definable character that an audience can sit and turn to their friends and family and go, you got to watch this show. There's this guy. He's A, B, C, D, E. If they can't describe you in a sentence or less to their friends and family, then it don't matter how good you are physically. It doesn't matter how athletically gifted you are. You can't generate heat, which is the interest, that will desire to watch you and then to pay a ticket, pay money to see you wrestle. You need that character that they can relate to, because they can't physically relate to what we do in the ring. But now, and that was the thing, I think, with Matt. For years, Matt was that kind of, he was solid. He was always kind of just in the background with Jeff. but you couldn't define him. You couldn't turn to somebody and go, there's this guy, Matt Hardy, and he's A, B, C, D, E. But now you can go, wow, there's this guy, man, he's crazy. He talks with this weird accent, his hair's all messed up. And you've described this guy that now a person who maybe casually watches wrestling goes, what? You know what, I'll check this guy out. Because now you're interested.
That's interesting because back in the day, Matt was kind of he was kind of the straightforward guy in that tag team. Jeff was the X factor.
Yeah.
Both could work, but Matt was that meat and potatoes, basic, psychology, tell that good story. And then here comes Jeff with all that cool out there stuff. Going back to your wrestling school with all the different ones that you have, and you created a syllabus. Are you able to, because, man, and speaking with you and talking about this character, it's one thing. I owe everybody a beer for my phone just going off, and I apologize, Al Snow.
That's quite right.
When you're talking about this character development, it's like, in watching one of your interviews, so much of the business is you have to be there to learn it. It's hard for someone to tell it to you. And I want to get into your theories of the degradation of the business. You've told it before, but I just love it. So, in talking about how important the character development is, and I want to go back to, when you really found success after 14 years in the business of being the best kept secret, you said, hey, at 2 years, that's good. But at 14 years, you want the secret to get out. So how are you getting these guys in all these different places to grasp the concept of the strength of character and the development?
Well, what we first do is, because I have 3 levels of training. When you're a beginner, you come in and you don't even get in the ring most of the time. You learn how to actually wrestle. I train people the way I was trained, which was first you learn how to actually wrestle, because everything we do is quite real and legitimate physically. So I want you to learn how to do that and how to protect yourself and the other person while you're doing it. Guys aren't taught, and I'm not downing the modern day wrestlers because they're all amazing, but they're taught differently in that they're not taught to take a bump for the guy. They're taught to give a bump to a guy. And you should never give a bump to the guy. You just do the move, and the guy should take the bump for you and make you look like $1 million, There's like that story. The best example of that was Owen Hart, and Owen was such a cut up. And, it was Owen and Yokozuna working with, Davey and Lex Luger. And Lex had made some smart ass remark to Owen about being a big star or something like that. So Owen taught him a lesson. So whenever Davey would get in the ring, David hip toss him and Owen just go flying. David tag right out. Owen call a hip toss for Lex, and he'd just go over like a tub of shit, And it finally got to the point where Lex was over there hot, and he's shaking, and he comes in, and you see him Owen calling him, telling him to press slam him, and he just goes dead weight on him, and he's trying, he can't get him up, and he finally just dumps him, tags Davey. Davey comes in, presses him, and just walks around the ring, bumping him up and down, and then slams. Because you don't bump a guy. The guy takes the bumps for you, and he can make you look like $1 million. He can make you look like a tub of shit. What Owen taught.
I remember hearing that story. You told it perfectly. What was the jest behind that? Because Luger was full of himself, or what happened?
Luger got all. Yeah. He thought he could get over on his own, and that basically. It was all him, and Owen was like, no, I'm going to show you it's not, and he went out of his way to teach him.
I'm jumping all over the place with you. Lex came in, back in the day, I guess it was NWA, WCW, surrounded by, working with Flair, the Horsemen, tons of talent, really helped him get over. And he goes over to New York. They paint up that school bus, red, white, and blue. Hey, man, Lex Express, and not so fast, my friend. It did not work. So we saw that, and, the hell, they got the USS, whatever, the battleship where he slammed Yokozuna, flew him in on a helicopter. I mean, man.
You can't put a rocket more up his ass.
And Vince, Vince has given him all the tools in the world to get over, and he gives everybody the tools, or gives everybody an opportunity. But he's got the rocket strapped to Lex, and it just ain't working. No. So. What was it as far as, like you said, going 14 years in the business, all of a sudden, was it the head that broke you out? Yeah. Because, dude, I was watching back stuff from 1998, and you were over, like, I can't say the word, it's an F-bomb. You were really, really over. So after 14 years of being the best kept secret, working all the damn territories that you worked, what did you think when you finally come up with that head idea, and then all of a sudden shit started going upward for you, and you were rocking the house? As we saw with Lex, given everything in the world, all the tools couldn't do it. You, after all the solid work, great mechanic, great psychology, great trainer. What did you think when it clicked for you as far as now as you try to teach all of this stuff to guys and gals that want to come up in the business?
Well, here's what I teach, and this is the biggest mistake, one of the biggest mistakes I made, because I don't proclaim I know anything, because I don't. It's all based on experience, where I screwed up, where I made the mistakes. And I think you'll understand because you kept it in your head. And I lost track of it. And that is that this is not a job. This ain't Walmart. You don't get hired. You don't get fired. And I know that they use that a lot, these terms. So-and-so got fired from WWE. So-and-so a wrestler can't be fired. He's never been hired. He's in business for himself. It literally is a partnership between Vince McMahon and the wrestler. Vince gives you a platform, and then regardless of what the platform is, whether you're on the top of the card, the middle of the card, the bottom of the card, he gives you a platform. Now it's up to you to create something that Vince can exploit and that he can use to move you up and both of you together make money. You did it yourself. I mean, you were in the middle of the card. They didn't have any real plans for you, and you came out and you made yourself an attraction, and when you got over, you kept yourself in that mindset of, I got to keep getting over, I got to keep making this money because it was not a job. And this will be a real controversial thing for me to say, but it won't be the first time I've done that. But I think one of the biggest downfalls in wrestling right now is that Vince gives that down. A lot of places give a guaranteed contract. Vince gives you a downside guaranteed contract, and the boys now, they have something to lose. So now they don't go out and they don't perform like trying to make themselves an attraction. They don't perform to try to get themselves over and to move up and make as much money as they can in whatever time frame they have. They play it safe because they don't want to upset somebody. They don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. They don't want to get heat and then get fired. When they don't understand is if they use that platform to get themselves over, even if they got cut loose from WWE, they could still go out and make money elsewhere. And if they utilize that to get themselves back over and reinvent themselves, much like Matt Hardy, Vince would always bring them back so he could capitalize on them again and promote them again so that the two of them could make money. And where I made my mistake, because the reason I know this is because I was there in 95 and 96 and 97 with WWF, and, I wasn't going anywhere. We did the New Rockers thing Marty and I did, and it was awesome to be with Marty, but Marty's heart wasn't in it, and rightfully so, because, he felt like it was a knock on what he and Sean had done, and the death of anything is putting new in front of it. I mean, you just, right there, you're done.
The new originals.
So, the new originals. And, and I was young, and I was frustrated, and my head was so far up my ass I couldn't see. I'd have to have a glass stomach.
You say this in interviews before. You had your head so far up your ass, or you didn't really understand your gimmick. Maybe that might have been the head part.
That too.
When you said you had your head up your ass, I mean, because I never, and to what in what regard? Because I never knew you as a partier, or where was your head?
I came from. You got to understand where I came from was whenever I went and worked somewhere. It got to the point where when the territories died, I was a heel for most of my career at that time. So I was brought in like they're running a good regular town, it's not really a territory, but you got 2 or 3 towns that they're running these outlaws with, and you might be the top guy, the babyface. Well, I was the guy that was brought in to kind of get you over, but I could get heat and then I'd get you over and you could beat me, but I could come right back again in 2-3 months and I'd get myself more heat and I'd get another run and that was where I came from. And then I went to Smoky Mountain and then, worked as a heel there and pretty much worked at the middle or top of the card with Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson and, and the Rock and Roll Express. Now here I come to WWE. I show up, they give me a babyface gimmick with a mask that I carry out, I put on, I wrestle, I take it off, and it got over like a fart in church, which again, I put that responsibility on myself because if I knew then what I know now, I could have done it a lot better. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I can understand though. I mean, first of all, that's a pretty strange gimmick, and if you're coming from the straightforward world and from old school, from meeting Gene and Ole, and then all of a sudden, bam, hey, here's your deal. You're going to the ring and put this mask on, and then you're going to take it off. I mean, to me, that's like what the F right off the bat. Am I right?
Yeah, and it's funny, and I tell people this all the time, because Vince and I had a long conversation. I was like, boy, that's going to be different, you know. And he laid out, I swear to you, and, you know, he may not even remember, but he, you know, all the vignettes they did for Glacier, I mean, what he described to me almost verbatim was what they did for Glacier, that they were going to do all these vignettes to explain the gimmick. And then we didn't. We just, hey, you got to show up here in Winnipeg, and you know, we're going to debut you live on Raw. And I'm like, oh, okay, this will be interesting. You know, I came in like that. Then I get to run with Marty. Now Marty's going to leave. Now I'm right back in wandering around.
Yeah.
So, you know, luckily I knew Candido, God bless his heart. I loved Chris. He was such an awesome guy. I mean, you know, who couldn't like him? I mean, even no matter what show you were on, the minute he showed up, that show got 100% better because he loved the business.
Yeah.
You know, he was buddies, you know, he was a right-hand man with Paul at the time, Paul E. And, you know, they were doing a little bit with WWE. So I talked to Chris because I knew I had to get out of there. I had to go someplace else to get myself over again so that the people in WWE would watch me on somebody else's TV and go, hey, let's bring this guy back. Or Eric Bischoff down in WCW would pay to steal me, or Paul would pay to keep me. And that was my mindset when I went to ECW. I'm like, I got to get over. I got to get myself over.
Right.
So I'm thinking that mindset, you know. And then when I do get over, I was expecting to be a heel, but I'm a babyface, and I'm like, I didn't quite understand it or get it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I gotten over so much that now, you know, I talk to Vince, and Vince brings me back. Now Vince, you know, in his defense, never really quite got the gimmick, and I've heard you say this too, you got to have a relationship with the old man. You have to. It's important. And I never did because I was always brought up in that, hey, it's the boys and then there's the office. You know what I mean?
Old school.
Exactly. And you go do your thing and, you know, you don't bother them and all that kind of stuff. So I never took the time, which I should have, to establish a relationship with Vince. Because and I've explained this before, that what does everybody want? What does everybody need? Everybody thinks that's about getting oral sex. It had nothing to do with that because I was shooting an angle that nobody realizes. Whenever I would do that, if you pay attention, I'd get angrier as I was doing it because I was shooting an angle because I was going to get jealous and turn on the head, and I wanted to work an entire angle with the head.
Yeah.
You know, but I never explained that to Vince, so he never got it.
You know, it's funny because I always do say, you know, you got to have a relationship with the old man, or, you know, Triple H or whatever the deal is. Right now, it's still the old man's sandbox.
Right. Yeah.
And so it's like, when I came in there, I'd been working 7 years. So I was already a pretty good mechanic. Psychology was coming along pretty decent. Not the greatest in the world, but, you know, I had a pretty good game plan, and I could have a match with pretty much anybody. And I brought him in as a ringmaster, did a ringmaster for 6 months, whatever it was. All the other guys, Mark Merrow, Vader, everybody, Mark Henry, a couple other guys, Mick Foley. Everybody had a gimmick there pushing all those guys. There's a couple other guys that came in about the same time, and they dropped that ringmaster gimmick on me. Well, you know, I'd torn my tricep and, you know, needed the money, working for Paul Lee. Paul Lee kind of harnessed me, taught me the promo ability. I'll stop telling my story. Everybody's heard it before, but my relationship with the old man started when we were filming 2 Monday Night Raws because we couldn't afford to film a Monday Night Raw live every single week. So we'd film 2 Monday Night Raws, and that second one would go to post-production. They finally started giving me a little bit of promo time, and then I noticed when I watched the show back, they were editing out some of the lines that I was saying because I was supposed to be a heel. And it was up there somewhere in Worcester, Lowell, whatever it was, Mass. And it was a Monday Night Raw. And I could see the old man walking in front of me, heading to his office. We're about to do live TV. And I said, hey, Vince, I said, you got a second? Dude, I was nobody. You know, I think I was probably still a ringmaster, or just maybe, I think I was still a ringmaster. And I just said, hey, man, I said, I noticed that when you guys are, you know, editing the Monday Night Raw, I said, when I watch the show back, y'all are editing out a lot of what I say. I said, I just wonder why that is. Yeah. And he looked at me because I was supposed to be a heel, and this was 95, 96. He goes, well, Steve, quite frankly, you're popping the guys in the truck. And I'm like, that's like, dude, if you can pop the guys in the truck, you can pop anybody because they've seen it all and heard it all. And so I just told him point blank, I just said, the old man is the old man. And when you're new in the company, he really has that godlike, presence.
Oh, yeah.
So I told him, I just said, listen, Vince, I said, I'm 6'2", 250. I got a bald head, goatee, black trunks, and black boots. I said, you got guys here 6'10", 7 feet, 300, 320 pounds. I said, if you take my personality from me, I said, I can't compete. But if you give me my personality, I said, I can compete with anything you got. And he says, okay, Steve. And that's how my relationship started. And that's when he stopped editing me, get back to you. But yeah, it wasn't like I was a relationship expert. I came up a little bit behind you because you got into business in 82. I got in the back end of 89, but so half generation apart, a year apart in age. But yeah, it was like a relationship kind of started there. And as you know, as the more you work with Vince or the higher you get, the more important you become to him. So all of a sudden, you're almost like best friends or best business partners.
And when the next guy comes up, you kind of start fading, to the back, and this guy comes forward. That's how it works. Yes. And to Vince's credit, you were nobody, I was nobody. And I remember when my run was starting, I could see, because you learn how to look 2 and 3 and 4 steps ahead all the time, and I could see my run was coming to an end with Marty. And, I showed up, I forget what building it was. I'd showed up early and Vince was in his office. I went in, he would talk to anybody, you know what I mean? If you wanted to talk business and you wanted, cause that's all he cares about. It's all he loves it. And he loves the process guys talk about, there's a glass ceiling and there's this and there's that. There is, there's politics, you're not going to fool anybody. It's an ultra competitive situation up there. You got 3 seconds of television time. There's 80 guys in the back that want that 3 seconds of television time and are questioning why you got it and are going to do everything they can to take it away from you. It's just what it is.
Yeah.
But Vince wants genuinely for every guy. You hear guys all the time, well, Vince doesn't want me to get over it. And I used to say the same thing. And that's what I mean by saying my head would fall off my ass, because Vince wants everybody to get over. Because the more people that get over, the more successful he is, and the more he can take credit for the fact of the boom of the business, because the more you get guys over, the more business we do.
The Steve Austin Show. The Steve Austin Show. The Steve Austin Show. The Steve Austin Show.
It's a funny thing with Vince, because and given that opportunity, I've told this story a million times, but you haven't heard it directly from me. We were at the Garden, and you know how short that entrance to the Garden is. I got that blue curtain right there, and I was sitting there watching the matches, and Vince was right there too. God dang, it was always cool when Vince came to the Garden, because shit was on. That's a big show. That's our backyard. And so we were watching, and god dang, man, they hit Steve Blackman's music, and you remember Steve, man, MMA guy, had the nunchucks or the sticks or whatever, good body. Good dude, and god dang, you got a real good pop out of that crowd. And I looked over at Vince and said, god dang, it's a pretty good pop. And Vince looked at me, and it's one of the things, one of the many conversations, but this is one of the things that I'll always remember. And Vince looked at me and he goes, yeah, I really hope he can get over.
Yeah, because it don't matter the sound, we use that term pop, and I tell guys all the time, we misuse it, because it's not, pop's not when they make noise and when they react. It's pop is when I brought in the business, pop was short for pop their nut, to come.
Right.
So just because they cheered and they came up real strong, now Steve's got to get them to go, you know what I mean, to where he can actually truly get himself over and make that audience want to be him, live vicariously through him.
Yeah, but what I was getting out of that was he was sitting there like, here's the man saying, I really hope he gets over. He's giving him the opportunity, but it's up to each guy to get themselves over.
I tell guys all the time, you walk out through that curtain, you're in that ring, there is nothing Vince McMahon or anyone else can do to stop you, and there is nothing that anyone can do to help you. You are totally 100% on your own.
I've heard you say that before, but let me throw this at you.
Yeah.
Do you currently watch the system these days, the current product from WWE?
A little bit once in a while. And quite honestly, the only reason I don't is just because, like, I learned this lesson from Sandy Scott years ago. Sandy Scott was George Scott's brother, and he had been around the business for years. And I traveled with him when we were in Smoky Mountain. He was awesome. I mean, he's just such a good guy and down to earth. And he'd spend his time with Crockett's, Brian Hildebrand, God bless his heart. I mean, he was such an awesome guy. We'd sit there and we'd watch matches. I'd stay at Brian's house, whenever I go down to do the loop, and we'd stay there, and Sandy would stay there, and he'd just do nothing but complain about us sitting there watching other wrestling matches. He'd be like, God damn, why you guys, all you do is watch wrestling. And I go, Sandy, don't you do it when you go home? He goes, no, I don't. I said, why? He said, because this is what I do. It's not who I am, and I don't want it to become who I am. He said, I'll watch once in a while, but I don't want it to be where I come out here on the road. I work 7 days a week, in wrestling, and I go home, and now I watch wrestling too. He said, when it becomes who you are, it'll eat you alive, and you just won't survive. And I always took that to heart, So now I'll watch it once in a while, but I don't watch it all the time because I don't want it to become who I am.
During my run, I mean, and I'm sure during your run, let me ask you. I mean, dude, I was eating, living, sleeping, shitting. Everything was the business. That's how I operated. Everything else was second on, and maybe. I know you've got a few divorces on your, you got a few losses on your marriage record. So do I. I was all about the business, and I'm quite frank about that. But I guess what I'm getting at in today's system, when you tell those guys, anytime you get, it's a chance to get yourself over. But because there's really no other place, I mean, TNA, are you still with TNA or you're not with them anymore, right? Okay, so, but they're reorganizing or something's happening with them. But my point is, when we went to the Monday Night Wars and we were fighting with WCW, I just thought we was trying to beat them in the ratings. And I didn't know we was trying to, or we ended up putting them out of business. Hell, man, there's 50, 60, however many jobs that the boys ain't going to have now. Yeah. Some of the guys came over, a lot of guys, there was the invasion, all that stuff. But my point was, we weren't trying to put them out of business. To make the point that I'm trying to get to 5 minutes ago, these days when you do go out there, just from what I've seen, it's just so micromanaged. There's a lot of eggshells, and that's not an indictment on the system. And maybe that's my perception, but that's what I see is, man, you pretty much get this thing. And true to your point, hey man, once they ring that bell, how and what you do is everything. Can you still get yourself over in a micromanaged situation? Yes, you can. Okay. But you could push the envelope a little bit further back in the day when there's a little bit more job security because there were other places to go. These days, they're really, I mean, there's guys doing okay on the indie scene or Ring of Honor going back and forth to Japan, but in my mind, I still think, WWE is the place to be.
Oh, it is, without a doubt.
But good, but do you understand what I'm talking about? Just the
I understand exactly what you're saying, and I think that it harkens to the attitude of WWE. I'm not saying any one person in particular, but I think that they understand, like and again, this isn't knocking today's talent. You and I, we had the benefit of coming from a different world. We came from where we wrestled for a living, and again, I'm not saying this is an indictment, and I don't want anybody, I'm sure I'm going to get some people going, what the hell are you doing? I always piss somebody off, but it's a fact. When you have to wrestle for a living, when this is how you pay your bills, okay, your mindset's completely different. You don't care if somebody liked your match. You just care did enough asses come through the seats. Because honest to God, I must have been in business and worked for 12, 13 years. And I tell guys all the time, not one time, I can tell you, Steve, not one time. When I worked for Dick the Bruiser and he was the promoter, I worked for the Sheik, I worked for George Cannon, I worked for the Poffos, for Randy and his dad. I worked, I can keep going. Vern. Not one time did I ever walk back to the curtain and they ever asked me how good my match was. Only how many people are in the house. And they would determine how much of a factor I was in how many people were in that building, because if I was no factor, I didn't get booked again.
Right.
And that was all I cared about. Now, if you're working a regular job, Monday through Friday, and again, this is not a knock, it's just a fact. If you're working a Monday through Friday and you're wrestling on Friday or Saturday, and before you leave the house, and this is what's changed too, and this goes back to my statement about the downside guarantee or even guaranteed contract. When I left the house, when I first broke in, I knew when I left, I had to do something to make sure I was one of two things. I was either the thing that sold tickets or I was one of the things that helped sell tickets. when I first started, I didn't make hardly any money, and the reason I didn't was because usually I was plus one other match or additional all-stars or other exciting bouts. My name wasn't even on the show. You know what I mean? It wasn't even on the poster. So I ended up having to use the barbecue quite a few nights to heat up the old 50-cent Stewart sandwiches out of the gas station.
I heard you tell that story.
So I couldn't bitch about it because Dick the Bruiser taught me that too, because, you know, I was like expecting one night when I drove to Lafayette, Indiana, I was expecting I was going to get like $50 or something. I got like 10, and Dick's like, you know, he said you were poor. You were plus one other match, kid. What am I going to do? Am I going to take the money out of my pocket? And I'm like, you're right. I understand that now. So.
But speaking of those horrible, shitty payoffs, you know, I was making loops and you know, working in USWA territory. You know, it's $15 and $20 a night. And, you know, a lot of those are 400-mile plus, you know, round trip shots. You know, and that's when you get that paycheck, and the old veteran looks at you and he goes, he slaps you on the back. Hey, what you make, kids? What you save? Yeah.
That's right.
It's like, yeah, it's kind of hard to save shit when you ain't making shit.
Yeah.
Hey,
go ahead. To give you a good example, and I tell this story all the time. My daughter, she ended up dating a wrestler. She ended up marrying one, but he's a great guy. And but she was dating this wrestler, and he asked my advice. He's like, "Hey, you know, this guy wants to book me." And I said, "Oh, okay, good." He goes, "Well, he wanted to pay me $40." And I said, "Well, that sounds fair." He goes, "Well, I told him I couldn't come unless it was 50." I said, "You did? Why?" He goes, "Well, because I gotta pay gas and, you know, and all this." And I said, and he goes, he told me that they start everybody out at $40 and then they work them up from there. And if boyfriend, his name was Dustin, I said, if Dustin couldn't accept that, then they couldn't do business. And Dustin said, "Well, I need at least 50 or I can't come." And the guy said, "Well, I'm sorry, I can't book you." And Dustin looked at me and said, "Did I do the right thing?" I said, "Hell no, you didn't do the right thing." He goes, "Why?" I go, "Let me ask you a question. If I put your name on a poster, just your name, not wrestling, nothing else, we just put Dustin Ray's, that was who it was. He'll love the fact I'm telling the story. And I put just Dustin Ray's on the poster, and be honest. I said, how many people are going to walk into a convenience store, see Dustin Ray's, and go, "Oh, shit, I got to go spend $10 to see this guy"? He goes, "Well, probably nobody." I go, "Well, then you're worth nothing. That's how much your value is. And you're asking for 5 tickets of value, and you can't even sell 4. And you think that was right." He goes, "Well, when you put it that way," I will go, "There ain't no other way to put it. That's how the business works."
Right.
And back to my point, when you have the luxury, and again, this is not the fault of the talent. This is the way the business has kind of really devolved, in that you're a guy, and let's be honest, we put your name on a poster. Potentially, how many tickets are you going to sell just based on your name? Well, the promoter calls these guys, and the guys go, "I can't come for no less than $50 or $60. They go, "Okay, you're entitled to it. You're good." And they book them on the show, and they're guaranteed $60, whether there's 10 people there or 10,000. And so they don't have the same, am I making the point? They don't have the same drive. You know what I mean? The necessity, the need that they have to get themselves and make themselves an attraction on that show.
The Steve Austin Show. The Steve Austin Show.
You know what's really scary? Seeing just how much you could have been saving on car insurance by switching to Geico. It's almost as scary as that homemade elf costume your mom made you wear in junior high school. No, Geico can erase the memory of tripping down the hallway in oversized pointy shoes, but they could save you 15% or more on car insurance. Stop waking up at night in a cold sweat wondering what happened to that green onesie. Just switch to Geico and save. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance. I think the guys still have the drive or the hunger. I think they're enjoying being wrestlers. But there is a different sense of urgency. When ain't nobody there, you ain't going to make no money. Because, dude, when I rolled into Tennessee way back in the day, you know, back to the $15 and $20 nights, I've been working in Dallas for 2 months. You know, I asked Jarrett, "Hey, when can I start working full time?" "I think you're ready now." Hell, I was horrible, Al. They sent me over to Tennessee. We were starving. I went back to Dallas, turned heel against Chris. Came back. And Jarrett put me on a $100 a night guarantee. Dude, that's mega money back in the day. So all of a sudden, the territory takes a shit. I go to my locker room in Evansville where we got paid. hell, there's not a string of hundreds there. There's back to the 40s, the 60s, the 30s. I go to Jarrett right before we get on the tour bus, getting ready to go to Dallas. I said, Jerry, what happened to our guarantee? He spits his tobacco in his can. He goes, well, Steve, territory's down. He goes, if you need to leave, I understand, but, that's the way it was. My guarantee got cut off, so I just told him, I said, no. I said, I don't want to go anywhere. I don't want to work myself out of a job here. I'm not throwing a fit. That was one of my first dealings of money. I said, I'm going to stick around, of course. I like my job, but I said, maybe if the territory comes back, we can get back to the guarantee. He goes, that'd be fine, Steve. But it was back in the day. And then going into WCW, you would start off with a guaranteed contract, but you still had to, it was ingrained in West, especially when I first, left that guaranteed contract status that WCW was doing back in the early 90s in my first year in WWF. I took a big dump because there wasn't nobody there. So everybody going back, you're kicking, scratching, clawing, first of all, just to get a spot, climb up a spot. But if nobody showed up, wasn't nobody making no money. So it was a different atmosphere. It was a different vibe. It was a different era.
But I think it's for the guys today, it's a different experience. They don't have that experiance. Does that make sense?
Yes.
It's not that they don't have the drive or the desire or they don't have that experience. And back to what started this whole conversation, I think that's why a lot of the talent are micromanaged now, where back in the day, we were given a lot more free reign to do what we did because we all had that understanding or that experience. Some of us, like myself, kind of lost it there, and which was a huge mistake on my part. But
hey, man, when you I watched a match, it was a good match you had with Hannibal up there at Great Northwest Wrestling, and it was 3 years ago.
I might have been. I don't know.
Real solid match, and I just love just the basic psychology of it. And he's not necessarily a white meat baby face. And big guy, he was a champion, and you were definitely the heel. But I really enjoyed that match. So when was, and I'm going to recommend it at the end of the podcast. I guess my question to you is, when did you stop actively competing? Will you still take on a match? Are you done?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So you're still going.
I still do. Cause, and the only reason I do is because I love it. I enjoy it. And I still find it a challenge. I still am learning things and trying to experiment and go out there and, play around. Like one time, not that long ago, they had a big Legends of Cobo Hall match, a show, in Detroit. So they brought a lot of us that had worked in Cobo Hall back in the day, for George Cannon and the Sheik and all that. That was the site of where I got my first concussion, because one of the fans had thrown a full can of Stroh's beer. It was unopened. It hit me right in the forehead, knocked me completely out, and gave me a concussion because it was one of those steel cans, and it was full, and it hit me right smack in the forehead. But I was working with Shane, and there was and you've had them. There's a moment like I'm the baby face, but I know I'm doing the head gimmick, to try and get the head over, and I'm like, you know what, if I were to just take this thing and take it back to the locker room and just put it back and come storming back out, I could immediately become the heel. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I could turn that crowd, and I could start getting some steam on Shane, and I could get the crowd. And, you kick yourself because you don't do it, because it's a quick, but when you look back on it, when you get backstage, you're like, man, if I'd have just taken that back and just did that, it would have been a much better match. I'd have gotten, I'd have turned heel, and I could have controlled the match, and I could have dictated the pace, and I could have built the audience, and then they would have actually popped when Shane beat me, and I still enjoy figuring it out, of trying different things, and if it works, great. If it don't, what did I do wrong? What should I have done? Should I have went right? Should I have went left? Should I have done it a little longer? I still get such a kick out of doing that. And
I was going to lead on by asking you how you're feeling right now, but going back to that match with Hannibal, the thing that stuck out was the basic psychology and telling the story. And it was one of the things that was in the 90s. I was riding down the road with Paul Orndorff, and he had just had a match with Paul Roma. And I was riding shotgun, and he was driving. And I said, man, at one point he had this deep arm bar on Paul Roma, and Paul was on his knees, and Paul was standing over him, and it was just that moment of power. And, they just had a regular match. Mr. Wonderful was a basic, salt, meat and potatoes, type wrestler. Not going to take any crazy bumps. He's going to give you straight up psychology. And so we're riding down the road, and I said, man, there's one part of that match that just really stood out to me. And he goes, wait, I'll tell you. Driving down the road, he goes, it was when I had him in an armbar, wasn't it? They probably worked 12 minutes. It was a house show. I said, how did you know? He looked at me and he goes, that was power. I was showing you power. And he goes, that's what got you. I said, you're right. It is. He had complete control. And that's what mesmerized me during that match. But to go back to the match you had with Hannibal, it's not the greatest match in the world. But what I took away from it was just your mannerisms, your body language, the execution, the psychology. He's more of a vicious type worker from the stuff I've seen from him in the past. So like I said, he's not white meat, but I just love the body language and just the simple things. And you never pander to the crowd. There's too much pandering going on in today's wrestling scene, but it was body language and it was a psychology and a strategy of the match. But do you remember what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
When you were vicious, I mean, it was straight up. It wasn't overdone. It wasn't underdone. It was just perfect.
When I went out there, I knew, because he had told me, because I understood. I mean, he owns the company, and he's got to go around, and but to your point, I'm looking at him, and he paints black around his eyes, and he's a big guy.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at him, I'm thinking, boy, for one, since I had the head, I mean, it's hard for me to turn heel in matches. I have to get real creative, but. When you understand what a heel's job is, then it gets a little easier. And that is, my job is to get that baby face over. Meaning, I got to make everybody in that building, that baby face has got to become their car. I tell guys all the time, if you want real heat, you have to get you got to make the baby face a person's car. And what I mean by that is, if we walk outside right now, we see somebody standing there with a can of gas, pouring it all over a car, and they're setting fire to the car. Now, it ain't your car. It ain't my car. They're probably most likely not going to do anything. But most people now will get their phone out and scream World Star and start videoing it. Or they'll call the police because it's not their car. They have no investment. Now, if we walk outside, we see it's your car, okay? You're probably going to run over and try and kick the guy's ass. Because it's your car. You care more. If we walk outside, now this is a home run for a heel. If we walk outside and we see somebody setting fire to your car with your family and your dog in it, you're probably going to run over there and try and kill him because you care more. You have more investment. So my job as a heel is not to get my shit in. It's not for me to do all my cool moves. My job is to make that baby face somehow everybody in that building's car. Even if I just make them, I'm trying to make them the car with the family and the dog.
Right.
Now I can get somebody to come in the ring and try and stab me. But if I can at least make him their car, now I do one thing to him, I've just done it to everybody in the building. And it don't matter how you do it, you have to do that. You got to make that baby face that audience's car. So they care. And it was tricky. I mean, it ain't easy when you're working with a guy that's probably a little bigger than you. He looks like he does. He looks like a heel. Yeah. And people know you as a babyface, and they've seen you on TV. And let's face it, I mean, the only reason, you get booked on these independent shows is that, it's for the nostalgia thing. The audience remembers you from TV. They want to see you come out, do your thing. They want to see me come out, act like a lunatic, run around the ring, hit somebody with a plastic hat, yay, and we all go home. But now I'm being put in here to now work with, and I understand he owns the company and he's got to go around and try and get sponsors, and so he's got to kind of be a babyface. Okay, well that means I can't do my shtick the way I normally do it. I got to do it a little differently, and I got to try and get him over so that I can get some kind of heat on it.
Dude, you've been doing this since '82. How you feeling?
Oh, every day there's something that hurts every day. If I woke up tomorrow and something didn't hurt, I'd ask my wife to kick me right in the nuts so I'd feel normal. So that's the truth. Like, it just, something hurts. And that's what I tell guys all the time. Like, because, remember when we first broke in, all the vets would always say, less is more, kid. You got a bump card, and you'd be like, and you just throwing yourself all over the place, just taking bumps, you're out there just, I'm wrestling, I love it, it's so awesome, and I never got it. And then I started realizing this shit hurts. And it hurts a lot, and it's going to hurt for the rest of my life. Like, I can't get up off the floor sometimes now. You know, I got to grab a chair and push myself, do it practically a dip just to get up.
What's the worst you got hurt in the ring?
I mean, there's been a couple. I broke my neck in Japan. Same move that was done to you with Owen. Koji Kitao dropped me, and I didn't even know it, but I had 2 fractures, and didn't know it until years later when I got a CAT scan. And then from all the concussions, not many people knows. I've never really talked about it publicly, but I had 2 minor strokes back when I was in WWE. Actually, like now I can't track time anymore. I don't have a clock. Like you go, oh, that was 3 years ago. I go, okay, because I have no idea how long it could have been 2 months ago. I have no idea.
How's your recall of your career? Because, you know, a lot of guys, there's a real big blank spot on the invasion angle. Everybody's hating, because everybody loved the invasion angle. They'll ask me questions about it. I said, dude, don't ask me no questions about it because I really don't remember it.
Yeah.
And so it's like, you know, if we're working right now, call me a 3-step high spot, because anything other than that, I'm probably going to forget. How's your memory?
It's shaky. I mean, I'll remember some stuff, and you know, and then if I talk to somebody like, you know, you and I sit down, we start shooting the shit, and then, you know, it'll make me remember something else. You know, but it's got to be something that's it's got more emotion to it for me to connect to it. You know, like because of the time thing, like the doctor explained to me, like everybody has like their memories are like photographs or videotapes, but they're in a file cabinet. So like you can go, oh, well, that was 2 weeks ago. And then it's, you know, right there. Or, oh, that was a month ago or 3 years ago. Like mine are all in a big pile on the floor. So I got to dig through and try and find. So sometimes it's harder for me to remember, you know, something particular. I'm just amazed. Like, you know, we talk like Gene Okerlund. You talk to him, and what an awesome guy that guy.
Yeah.
You talk to him, and I mean, it's just back in 1968, you know, me and Bobby Darin, we were doing this, and we were in this town, and we were at this time, and we went to this diner that was named this, and I ordered this, and Bobby ordered. They're like, how do you remember all of that?
Yeah.
You know, or you talk to Cornette. Cornette's astounding.
Yeah.
You know, because he'll tell you the time of day, the number of hours it took to get there.
Well, first of all, Cornette is brilliant in that respect, but he also told me because he booked for so long, he had everything written down. But yeah, he does have tremendous recall. No ifs, ands, or buts.
It's amazing. It really is. You know.
Hey, I wanted to talk to you about 1995, or when we first met, because a lot of people don't know this, but I've talked about it all the time because it was really helpful to me. You got another hour to talk?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, before we close down the show, here's what's coming on the next show. My meeting with Al Snow when I went to Lima, Ohio to train with Al Snow at his wrestling academy for about 5 or 7 days before I made my WWF debut. Why I went there, D'Lo Brown was there. And then 82, I want to talk to you about Jim Lancaster, the guy who originally trained you or initially trained you. And I want to talk to you about the Sheik, Dick the Bruiser, and some of those other guys, and some other lessons coming up in the business. But before we knock off this show, I want to talk about collar and elbow clothing apparel you just came out with, or it's been out.
Yeah. We started back in mid-July, and what I was trying to do was come up with and I didn't know at the time, but I guess there's a couple more, but I wanted like an Under Armour or a Nike or a brand just for wrestling, you know, and not just professional wrestling, all wrestling. And that was why we came up with the name of Collar and Elbow, because whether it's Greco-Roman or freestyle or catch wrestling or professional wrestling, it all starts with some sort of type of collar and elbow lockup. So we came up with the idea to come up with designs. If you're a wrestling fan and, like, you know, I'm wearing this one, like the heavy metal design, and it says collar and elbow on it. If you're not a wrestling fan, you don't know. It just looks like a cool shirt. But if you're a wrestling fan, you know, you see it and it's like, oh man, that's pretty awesome. And you get it. You understand it. Like we just came out with a new design a couple months ago. It was tackle and drop down and hip toss and get it again. Now, you know, it's kind of a homage to the Beatles. They did an album cover like that. But like, if you're a wrestling fan, you know, and you're wearing it, somebody else sees it and they go, oh, I get that. Drop down, hip toss, get it again. Yeah, I understand. And that's what we tried to do. We tried to come up with, you know, designs and stuff that people can wear, they can wear out anywhere and they can still be a wrestling fan, and other wrestling fans get it.
Well, where can they find Collar and Elbow Clothing? Talk to us about your social media and your wrestling schools.
collarandelbowbrand.com. They can go there, and if they round up the purchase, a portion of the roundup of that money gets contributed to Cauliflower Alley Club to help their ongoing charitable efforts. So we've donated quite a bit of money over the last few months to Cauliflower Alley Club. And for those that don't know, Cauliflower Alley Club's been around for decades, and, they help older wrestlers that have, their careers are over, older boxers. They just recently beat Brian Blair. I think he's now the president of Cauliflower Alley Club. And I think they talked about they got a handicap, accessible van for somebody to help them get around that they couldn't afford on their own. But go to collarandelbowbrand.com. I'm on social media on all of them as The Real Al Snow, because yes, there were some fakes. And like I told you, I would message him. I go, look, brother, I don't mind you doing it, but you might want to put the bar higher. You know what I mean? If I'm going to fake being a celebrity, it ain't going to be me. I'll be Steve Austin. I'll be Lucille Ball. I'll be Neil Armstrong, but I'm not going to be Al Snow. I mean, come on. That ain't going to get you that over. So you might want to try to set that bar up a little bit more, Maybe you were thinking you just get under the radar, but it didn't work.
Well, let's stop off here, Al. I want to get into part 2 of the podcast, because in part 2 of the podcast, it's going to end up, I'm going to have a match. It's a very famous match with the one and only Bret the Hitman Hart. I needed some submission holds because it was a submission match. I was at my couch in San Antonio, Texas, watching Monday Night Raw, and all of a sudden it's announced that I'm going to be in a submission match. I was mad as a hornet. I didn't know one single submission hold. Al Snow, The Real Al Snow on Twitter. Al, good talking to you.
Good talking to you.
This has been a Podcast One production. Download new episodes of The Steve Austin Show every Tuesday at PodcastOne.com. That's PodcastOne.com.
Welcome to the MIP.
Yeah!
The Michael Irvin Podcast.
You knew this was coming.
Guess who?
Let me start this thing off. Join me every week for the Michael Irvin Podcast. We'll give you the full MIP experience. I'm talking everything from football to fashion. I will be chopping it up with playmakers, headline makers, and I am throwing haymakers. I'm the MVP of the MIP. Don't miss it.
Download new episodes of the MIP, the Michael Irvin Podcast, every Thursday on Apple Podcasts, Podcast One, and Spotify.